Hey everybody, tonight I'm going to be doing a brief tutorial on doing some more descriptive statistics with SPSS, and then I'm also going to give you a little bit of an introduction on how to format some tables using Excel for reporting some of the data in your final project. Of course, there are multiple ways of making tables. Excel is just one of them, but this is the way that I'm going to show you that I normally use to create tables just so that you have a guide to start from. So just like last week in my tutorial, which if you haven't watched, I recommend you go back and watch because I do a review of SPSS and I also show you how to do some frequencies as well as crosstabs in SPSS. So if you haven't seen that, please go back and watch that. Some of the things that I covered in there in more depth, I'll be skimming over tonight because I've already covered them. So if I'm going too quickly for you, you might want to go back and watch that one first to see if you pick up anything that you aren't getting. So I'm using these example data, health data in SPSS, which I've already opened. And we've used these before in the semester, earlier in the semester. And basically, they're just some fake data that I made. We have an ID variable, which is pretty much not really a useful variable for us. We have gender, HIV status, and borough, which are all categorical variables. Remember, categorical variables are variables where the value has no meaning. So I'll just remind you up here, this button here that says value labels, it's two arrows, one going to a 1 and one going to an A. If you turn this off, it will show you the numbers that are underneath of these categories. Again, the reason that they're categorical is because these numbers don't mean anything. In SPSS, these numbers are just placeholders. And when we enter value labels for these numbers, we do it in variable view. Remember, I quickly did this because I already reviewed it last week. I went to variable view down here. And then up here, we have our three categorical variables. Again, gender, HIV status, and borough. And under values, you'll see that we've listed already what the values are. So if you have some variables that are categorical and you don't know what those values are, typically there will be a code book that will tell you what those values are. You can normally find that code book online, or if it's for the class, then you should typically be able to find the code book with the data set. And then you can just enter these values. So you would just enter, for example, if we had 3 and that was unknown, we could enter that and then add that. However, that doesn't exist in this case, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it. But I'm just showing you this is how you would add those value labels to tell you what the different categories mean. And then when you press this button up here under data view, those values will show up there. And so then instead of seeing the numbers, which are meaningless, you'll see these labels, which have some meaning for us. And then we have some other variables that are more continuous. We have the individual's age, they're a score on a depression measure. Again, if you hover over the variable, it will tell you whatever you have in the variable labels. So here are the variable labels. These are the value labels. To the left of them, we have the variable labels. This tells us what the variable means. If you hover over the variable here, it will show you what that variable label is. All right, so we have these variables here. So the first thing that we want to do maybe is just look at what the frequencies are for gender, HIV status, and borough. So how many people in our data set are male and female, how many are HIV negative, HIV positive, and HIV unknown, and how many live in each borough. So I am just going to go so there are two ways to do this. The first one is quick. I can go into variable view, highlight them, highlight them, and then I can just do descriptive statistics. If I do that, it's going to automatically give me the frequencies tables for those. The other way of getting those frequencies tables is to go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies, and then pull those variables in here and do it that way. I am just going to go with the simpler way. And here we have it. So now what I'm going to do is show you how we can report these values in Excel into a table. So the first thing you want to do always, again, I went over this last week, is check that you have all the valid cases. So in this case, we don't have anybody missing data on any of these variables, which is great. So I'm going to open Excel and put it over here. And so the first thing that we want to do is we want to make our first column the column where we're going to put the names of the categories. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that it can fit those. And in the first row, I'm just going to put gender. And then I'm going to put male and female. Under that, I'm going to put HIV status. And then I'm going to put HIV negative, HIV positive, and unknown. And then I'm going to put borough of residence. And under that, I'm going to put Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, Bronx, and Staten Island. Now, this is a little bit hard to look at. These, if you can see this up here, the ribbon up here, you'll see that it has this section called alignment. This button here to the left, if you hover over it, it says decrease indent. This button over here to the right says increase indent. What we're going to do is we're going to indent the categories. So here we have gender, HIV status, and borough of residence are the names of are what we're calling these variables. So I'm calling this gender, I'm calling this HIV status, and I'm calling this borough of residence. You want to give them a name because it's helpful in presenting it. But then the variables underneath of it are what we're going to actually be reporting. There's no frequency of gender. 100% of our sample has a gender. The genders are male or female. So what we're going to do is just tab those over by 2. So I press this tab button twice. I'm going to do the same thing for the 3 HIV statuses we're going to be reporting. And I'm going to do the same thing for the 5 boroughs that we're going to be reporting. So now what you can see is I have a section for reporting the frequency of males and females. I have a section for reporting the frequencies of HIV statuses, and I have a section for reporting the frequencies of borough of residence. Now, when we're reporting these, what we want to be giving are the same things that we're getting here. We want to be giving the sample, the size, the N, we call it, and we want to be giving the percentage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this row, and I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to have this option here to insert a row above. And so I'm going to press insert. And what that does now is it gives me a new row above this. And then here, for under the B column, I'm going to put an N. And under the C column, I'm going to put a %. And then I'm going to highlight both of those. And I'm going to go up here to the alignment section of the ribbon. And I'm going to center those. I'm also going to take the N and I'm going to italicize it. Then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all 3 of these. And I'm going to go right here in the font menu. You'll see if I hover over this, we have something that's called borders. And I'm going to click on this and I'm going to ask it to put a bottom border underneath of these for me. So the very first one is bottom border. And so now you can see it has a nice line underneath of it. So now I can go ahead and start typing in my data. Again, these gender, HIV status, and borough of residence are just labels for the variables that we're reporting. So nothing is going to go in those rows here. But for male, we see that we have 135 males, and that is 54.2% of our sample. For females, we see that we have 114, and that is 45.8% of our sample. So now we've reported the gender of our sample. The next thing we can do is HIV status. So for HIV negative, we have 121, and we see that that's 48.6% of our sample. For HIV positive, we have 90, and we see that 36.1% of our sample. And then for HIV unknown, we have 38, and we see that that's 15.3% of our sample. For borough of residence, we have 50 in Brooklyn, and that's 20.1%. We have 56 in Manhattan, and that's 22.5%. We have 54 in Queens, and that's 21.7%. We have 45 in the Bronx, and that's 18.1%. And we have 44 in Staten Island, and that's 17.7%. Okay, so now we're getting what looks like a table. The next thing that I want to do is just put a line underneath of these as well, just to make it look nicer. So I went up here and I inserted a bottom border under the last row. And then the next thing we need to do is insert another row above our top row right now. And we need to add a title to our table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select columns A, B, and C in row 1. And then I am going to go to excuse me, sorry, one second. Forget where this is. I think it's actually supposed to be here, but it might be hidden because of here it is. So merge and center. So what we want to do is merge and center. Let me just maximize this quickly because you may have it maximized. You'll see that merge and center is normally actually written out. It's normally got more space in this alignment section. Because I had this window minimized or smaller, this merge and center button was being hidden a little bit. But what you want to do is press this merge and center. So merge and center these 3 cells, and what that does is it turns all 3 of these cells into one big cell. And then I'm going to left align this cell, and I'm going to ask this cell to have wrapped text, and then I'm simply going to give my table a name. So I'm going to say table 1, and I'm going to hit, and oh, sorry. So in Excel, to get enter, you have to actually do Alt plus enter. So Alt plus enter will get you down onto the next line. And then I'm going to do descriptive statistics for demographic variables. And then that's hidden. So what we need to do is just make this bigger. So I'm taking the first row and I'm dragging it down so that it's bigger, and there we go. And then the last thing we want is to put a bottom border for this. So now you can see that what we have is something that looks more like a table. Now the last thing that we want to do is actually open our Microsoft Word, because it's easier if you put these into the Word file that you're using for the rest of your report. So I'm going to open Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, and I'm just going to show you quickly that if you just copy this, it pastes nicely into Microsoft Word. So I'm just going to paste it, and you can see here it shows up very nicely as a table in Microsoft Word. And you can do whatever you need to this. Excuse me, you can do whatever you need to this. For example, I could italicize this if I wanted to. Or I could not italicize that, and I could italicize this if I wanted to. We could also edit this table. So this table is still a table in Word, just like it is in Excel. However, you can't see all of the cells like you can in Excel. If you want to see those cells, you can. All you have to do is go to Layout and hit View Grid Lines in Microsoft Word. View Grid Lines will then turn on an outline of those. Now, notice these grid lines are just showing for your editing purposes. These grid lines are not going to show up, for example, when you print this page. So don't worry that you're adding all of these lines that you don't want to see. The dotted blue lines are invisible when it comes to printing these kinds of things. Those dotted blue lines are just there to show you where the different columns and rows exist. If you want to make visible lines, then you need to do what we did earlier, which is adding borders, which you can do here. You can add bottom borders, top borders, left borders, right borders, any kind of border you want, you can add. You can also do all of this in Microsoft Word, but I think it's easier to do it in Excel and then move it into Word afterwards. But I do just want to show you, for example, I can make this thinner. I can make it bigger over here. I can make these bold. So you can do anything that you need to do in Microsoft Word as well, but I think it's always easier to start with a Microsoft Excel table. Okay, so I'm not going to save this. I'm going to go back to Microsoft Excel. The next thing that we might want to do is report on something like the age or the depression scores in our sample. So we can actually take a table just like this and just delete things. I'm going to delete all the data that are inside of it, and I'm going to start a new table. Let's say that now, obviously, when you're creating tables, you don't want to delete them if you still need them. I'm just deleting it because I don't need that table anymore. Actually, you know what? Let me go back and not delete it. Oh, it won't let me go back. Oh, there we go. Okay, so instead of deleting it, why don't I do this? I am going to copy this. I'm going to copy just this whole sheet, and I'm going to paste it into sheet 2. Paste. And there you go. It's going to give me exactly what I had previously. And so now what I want to do is maybe make this table 2. You know what? Maybe I want to call table 2 means and standard deviations for, let's just say, health variables. Now you see that this needs to be made bigger again because it's not fitting on that line. Now what we're going to be reporting here, I'm going to delete these. See here, I'm right-clicking and deleting, so it's just going to take all of that and make it disappear. What we're going to be reporting now are going to be depression and health scores and the age. So we're going to be reporting means and standard deviations instead. So I'm going to change this N to an M. I'm going to change the percent to an SD for standard deviation. I'm going to make this italics. And then I'm going to put age, depression, and general health rating. And then, just like before, I'm just going to go ahead and put a border below that. And then all I have to do, I've highlighted these variables. Again, let me just show you I'm highlighting these variables. I right-click them and I do descriptive statistics. Oh, unfortunately, oh, so here we go. So Excel in this case, or I'm sorry, SPSS in this case gave us both things. It gave us descriptive statistics, and it also gave us frequency tables for these. Now, these frequency tables are obviously not helpful. We're not going to be reporting the number of people who got every point on these scales or who were at every age, every year of age. Instead, we can focus up here at the top on the mean, the median, the standard deviation. If I wanted to get those without just right-clicking, if I want to go through the menus, then I go Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Descriptives, or I can do Frequencies. So you can actually go to either menu. So let me just go to Frequencies. I like to use the Frequencies menu more. I'm just going to select these 3 and move them over. I'm going to do Statistics, and then I'm going to select Mean, Median, Standard Deviation. I'm going to ask it to turn off the frequency tables because they're not helpful for me in this case. And then I'm going to hit OK, and here I have it. So let me make this smaller. Let me open my Excel and make that smaller again too. And then here we go. Our mean age in this sample. So in fact, we could actually report all 3 things. If we want to also report the median, then maybe I'll insert a column here. So you see I'm right-clicking on column C and I'm hitting insert. And then here I can put median. And we can report all 3. So the mean age is 43.3. The median age is 44.0. And the standard deviation is 10.44. Now you see that because this was 44.0, it made it 44 without the 0. If we want all of them to have the same number of decimal places, I can use this number section right up here. This here where it says increase decimal will make sure that it always has 1 decimal point, even if that decimal point is a 0. For depression, we have 5.06. Oh, excuse me. So up here, we only did 1 decimal place. So here we should only do 1 as well. Or we could do 2. But whatever you do, you just need to be consistent. You know what? So in this case, let me choose to do 2 decimal points for the entire table. So I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to do increase decimal so that they all default to having 2 decimal points. Then 43.30 is correct, 44.00 is correct, and 10.44 is correct. Then I need 5.06, 5.00, 2.14, 2.112. So I'm rounding that in my head. If you put 2.116, Excel will round that for you because you've asked it to give you exactly 2 decimal places. So you could have put 2.116 if you didn't want to round that yourself, and Excel is going to automatically round that for you because we went up here and we asked it to give us 2 decimal places for all of them. You can see here, though, that it is still holding 2.116 as the value, even though it's showing you 2.12. Then we have 9.37, 9.00, and 5.043, which it will show as 5.04. And so there we have it again. I could take this. Oh, and also, by the way, when we inserted this median, it actually made it so that this cell got wider. And so now we actually don't need it to be quite so long. I'm going to make it a little smaller so that there's not so much white space above the phrase table 2. Then I just want to show you again, we can copy this, and we can paste that into Microsoft Word. And there we have it again. Remember, to toggle on and off those blue lines, you just select, you have to be inside the table. It won't work if you're not inside the table. So you have to select something inside the table, then you go to Layout and View Grid Lines, on or off, on or off. So you can see this is a really nice looking table. This is exactly what we want something to look like when we're making tables. So that's just a basic example of how to make some basic descriptive statistics. So we went over making frequencies and making descriptive statistics using mean, median, and standard deviation, running them in SPSS, as well as making them into tables. Please continue to post questions that you have in the discussion forum or send emails. And as you post questions, I will do my best to try to post additional tutorials that help to answer your questions and show you how to answer those questions. As I said, of course, you're also free to schedule time to meet during the online office hours with either myself or Professor Waldron. And other than that, email is also fine. I hope you all have a great night. Thank you.